What if everything we believed about Alistair was wrong? What if the smile that slices across his face like a painted crescent moon was never about dominance, never about sadistic joy, never even about theatrical flair? Look closely at him. Freeze any frame from Has-Been Hotel. Zoom into those crimson eyes. You will notice something unsettling. The grin is wide, polished, permanent. But the eyes? They never quite join the celebration. They watch, they calculate, and sometimes for a fraction of a second they look tired. Most fans accept the surface explanation. Alistair smiles because he enjoys chaos, because he is confident, because he is the radio demon and performance is power. But here is the problem. In older streams and scattered creator comments, Vivian Medrano hinted that Alistair adored his mother deeply, not casually, not vaguely, deeply. And buried within those fragments is a detail that feels almost too human for hell. His mother loved his smile. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. What if the grin is not an expression of joy, but obedience? Alistair once carried a philosophy in life, the idea that you are never fully dressed without a smile. Fans treat it as aesthetic branding, a gentleman's quirk, a vintage showman's motto. But this is where things get disturbing. That phrase does not sound like something a serial predator invents. It sounds like advice. It sounds like something spoken gently across a kitchen table in early 20th century Louisiana. It sounds maternal. Imagine a young Alistair, long before the static and the blood. A boy being told to smile even when life is cruel. Smile because it shows strength. Smile because it reassures others. Smile because a man must be composed. What happens when that advice hardens into a rule? And what happens when the person who gave that rule is suddenly gone? Psychologists describe something called defensive masking, a trauma response where a person locks their face into a socially acceptable expression to prevent vulnerability from leaking out. The more pain beneath the surface, the more rigid the mask becomes. Now consider this. We never see Alistair without his smile. Not when he is threatened, not when he is angry, not even when he is bored. It is not flexible, it is enforced. But who is he performing for? And this changes everything, because if the smile is not about intimidation, then it might be about preservation, a ritual, a promise kept long after the one who demanded it can no longer see. Shadows of a Creole kitchen. Alistair's affection for cooking is often played for dark comedy, jambalaya references, Southern hospitality twisted into cannibalistic punchlines. It is grotesque and charming at the same time. But here is the problem. Food in storytelling is rarely random. It is memory, it is comfort, it is identity. In fragments of lore, we learn that his favorite dish was his mother's cooking, not simply food, her cooking. That distinction matters. In the human world, kitchens are intimate spaces, recipes passed down like heirlooms. A son watching his mother stir a pot, memorizing the scent of spices, associating warmth with her presence. Now, remove the mother, leave the scent. What is left? But this is where things get darker. In hell, Alistair's relationship with food is warped. Cannibalism becomes ritualistic. He does not simply kill, he prepares, he serves, he presents violence like a dinner party. That is not random brutality. That is reenactment, a perversion of domestic memory. Could it be that every grotesque feast is a subconscious attempt to recreate a lost kitchen, a table that no longer exists? When trauma is unresolved, the mind loops. It reenacts fragments of safety in distorted ways. A murderer who stages his crimes, a demon who stages his dinners. And here is the chilling part. If his mother represented nourishment and stability, then her death would represent starvation. Emotional starvation, the kind that never ends. Hunger becomes symbolic, not just for flesh, but for comfort, for approval, for the echo of someone saying, "I am proud of you." But the truth is much darker, because if his descent into violence began after her death, then his transformation into the radio demon may not have been ambition, it may have been collapse. The Southern moral compass. Alistair follows rules, not hell's rules, his own. He despises rudeness. He respects deals. He protects certain individuals selectively. He carries himself like a gentleman from another century. That code is strangely rigid for someone who revels in carnage. But here is the contradiction. True chaos does not care about manners. True monsters do not cling to etiquette. So why does he? Children often internalize the moral framework of the parent they admire most. If his mother shaped his understanding of right and wrong, then even in hell, that compass would remain lodged in his psyche. Twisted, yes, but present. His violence is theatrical, but it is rarely sloppy. He punishes disrespect. He rewards entertainment. He maintains order within his domain. And this changes everything again, because it suggests he is still trying to be someone specific. Not good in a universal sense, good in her eyes. But the truth is much darker, because if his descent into violence began after her death, then his transformation into the radio demon may not have been ambition, it may have been collapse. Static and silent screams. Alistair's radio persona is constant. The transatlantic accent, the vintage cadence, the crackling sound effects that follow his voice like a ghostly orchestra. It is branding, yes, but branding can be armor. There are moments in Has-Been Hotel where the audio glitches, where the static intensifies, where his composure flickers for less than a second. Most viewers interpret it as stylistic flair, but what if those distortions are emotional interference? Radio static is noise that disrupts signal. In storytelling, it can symbolize suppressed emotion. Imagine grief as a frequency he cannot fully mute. Every time something brushes too close to vulnerability, the signal destabilizes. And then there is the deer symbolism, his antlers, his hunting aesthetic. In some cultures, deer represent innocence and sacrifice. In others, they symbolize a soul crossing between worlds. If his death involved a hunter, as hinted in lore, then deer imagery may not simply be stylistic, it may be memorial. But here is the most haunting detail, the subtle references to maman. Not shouted, not emphasized, just woven into his backstory. If his mother was French Creole, the use of that word carries intimacy, it carries softness, and softness does not survive easily in hell. So what if his deal for power, the mysterious contract that elevated him to overlord status, was not born from greed? What if it was born from isolation, from the unbearable silence after her funeral? Power becomes distraction, broadcast becomes escape. If the world feels empty, make it loud. And this reframes his entire afterlife. The radio demon is not just performing for hell, he is drowning out grief. The tragedy of the radio demon. Here is the theory that changes everything. Alistair is not driven by chaos. He is driven by the need to feel seen by someone who is no longer there. Every conquest, every deal, every dramatic entrance, it is all spectacle. And spectacle implies audience, but his intended audience is gone. In life, perhaps he sought success to make his mother proud, a charming radio host, a well-dressed gentleman, a man with ambition. When she died, that ambition lost its anchor. Without her gaze, achievement became hollow, so he escalated, from charming host to serial killer, from man to myth, from myth to demon. And here is the cruel irony. In hell, he achieved what many fear most, power beyond measure, recognition, infamy. But the one person whose approval mattered cannot witness it. So the performance continues endlessly, louder and louder, because silence would force him to confront the truth. His smile becomes permanent, because dropping it would mean admitting the grief beneath it. His hunger becomes ritual, because stopping it would mean feeling emptiness. His morality becomes selective, because abandoning it would mean severing the last thread connecting him to her. But the truth is much darker than a simple tragic backstory. It suggests that Alistair is trapped, not by hell's chains, but by unresolved mourning. He cannot evolve because he refuses to process loss. He cannot redeem himself because redemption requires vulnerability, and vulnerability would crack the mask. So the next time you watch him grin, ask yourself a different question. Not whether he is evil, not whether he is powerful. Ask who he is still trying to impress. Because beneath the static, beneath the laughter, beneath the theatrical cruelty, there may be something far more human than we expected. A son who was told to smile, a son who obeyed, and a son who never learned how to stop. And maybe that is the most terrifying part of all. Not that the radio demon enjoys chaos, but that his entire reign might be a distraction from a quiet, unbearable grief that has been echoing since the day the kitchen went cold. In a place defined by eternal noise, the loudest thing about Alistar might just be the silence he is running from. If this deep dive changed the way you see the radio demon, don't forget to like, comment your theories, and subscribe to Has Been Hotel Lore for more dark secrets.